Good evening and welcome to Athens City Council. It's Monday, May 14th, 2018 at 7 o'clock at night. And we have a full agenda tonight, and I thought I'd also offer a little bit of explanation about our format and the different parts to the meeting. The first part of our meeting is a committee meeting. This is the second Monday of the month, so that's when we'd be having them. And we do have 4 committees, of which we have 2 presentations under the City and Safety Services Committee. What we try and do is, if we can, if possible, to keep our discussion to within 15 minutes for each of the topics. And as we are in these committee meetings, you'll notice that some of our council members are up here. The council members who serve on that particular committee are the ones that are sitting at the dais. So these are our City and Safety Services Committee members, our chair, council member Kent Butler, and Chris Fall, and Peter Katsas. And they are the ones to whom they would direct questions or the discussion. And then also we'll, of course, have the presenters for that particular committee. After we're finished with our committee meetings, we're then going to have a special session tonight. And that's a little bit different. It's where we have the readings of the ordinances. So we'll be having some for third reading and then also for third, second, and first readings. And we're doing this in part because we do have a timely issue that we need to pass the ordinance on so that we're able to purchase road salt for next winter, and we were notified by the Department of Transportation that we have a deadline approaching, and it was just a very short window, so we need to be able to make sure our ordinance is in place before we make that contract and connection. So without further ado, then we'll move on then to City and Safety Services Committee with Kent Butler.
Thank you, President Nisley. Thank you. This evening we have 2 bullet points. First, a presentation from the Athens Municipal Arts Commission. There is a presentation from Kelly Lawrence and Scott Winland. Also present is Carol Patterson, who's the chairperson of the Athens Municipal Arts Commission. So they would like to discuss the possibility of a street closing for an uptown art event. The dates would be August 18th, and they're looking at a closing of Union Street between Congress and Court. So without further ado, I'll go ahead and afford them the opportunity to present. Thank you.
Okay, so we've decided to try to have an event for Athens that highlights the arts. And so we would close off that part of Union Street we would have a stage for music. We've already spoken with the poet laureate to present. You got a drumming group, OVST to do a piece from Pippin, and Passion Works to be there with all their fun puppets and flounces and such. So and then we'd have music, different acts that would be on the stage throughout the day. And then we'd have, we're asking for permission to have art vendors and to, I guess, suspend the noise ordinance.
Right.
And we've been talking with Ron Lucas, and he said that he could close down some of the parking spaces on Congress so our vendors could be there rather than trying to bus them in and out to their vehicles. They could just be parked along Congress. I don't know what else to say.
Yeah, do you have any questions for us so far?
Council members, if you have questions. Anyone? Councilmember Fall?
Can you say between which streets again, please?
Congress and Court,
okay.
That part of Union, a new part of Union. We've kind of walked through the space, and so once the cars are gone, we can have the vendors on the sides. We were thinking of maybe having some nonprofits there too, but they would be back away from the buildings as just a table, so people can still walk up and down the sidewalks without any problems.
And have you approached any of the businesses along here yet?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, we've so far been, everyone's in favor of it.
Okay.
It's okay. we have a couple more to talk to, but so far people are pretty excited.
Okay, great. That's awesome. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Fall. Councilmember Katsas?
Yes, the time of which the closure would happen, and then just for clarification, it sounds like some parking would be shut down on Congress. Is that like on the hillside?
Yes.
Going, okay.
Yes.
That was a suggestion from Ron as
Okay.
maybe a solution for the vendors parking. I think there's flexibility there for us to discuss what we want to do with that for sure. The other thing to keep in mind too is that still leaves the other street. I can't think of the name of the street that Bentley is on. You know, if you close that short part of Union, you can still get through to Court Street.
On President Street.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So we want to close from 8 a.m. to 10 p.m. So the event would run from 12 noon to 8 p.m. So that would give us 4 hours to set up and then 2 hours on the other end to close down.
Yeah. Mayor Patterson, thank you.
I'm just curious, since it's till 8 a.m. or to 8 p.m. rather, is the noise ordinance, suspension of the noise ordinance necessary?
I was curious about that as well. Since the event would be closing down at 8 and then 2-hour cleanup, that's what you're?
Correct.
Yeah. Yes, President Isley?
Isn't the noise ordinance enforced 24 hours a day? So I think you'd need to do it as the usual 3 ordinances that come through, the vending, the
For
noise.
amplified sound?
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. I guess Councilmember
I
Katsas?
did, yes. And just to get an idea of like, well, what the, I guess what the event would look like, the street itself, will you have a stage?
Yes.
Okay, so I mean, kind of, if you could kind of explain what you were hoping to
Well, we like the idea of having the stage on the Congress side of Union, so that when you turn the corner off of Court, you have sort of a amphitheater sort of look to that part of the street. We discussed that with Ron as well. And that's, in terms of the physical layout, that's what we'd be looking at. Now, you could probably speak to the, Kelly could speak to the vending.
Yeah, we're going to have, we'll have some space next to the stage so people can gather around and listen to music. And then the vending will start probably 20 or 30 feet back. We'll have some artist vending booths. We've also talked to, I think it's in Logan, it's for Johnny on the Spots, so that people don't use the restaurants. They will be on the street. So we would get 2 regular and 1 handicap accessible. And so the other end, the Court Street end, would be more of the beer garden area, seating for, a couple food vendors, and seating for people at the other end. So when they come in off of Court, they would see that first, and then art vendors on both sides, and then the stage with some space for people to gather down there at the end.
Thank you. And yeah, Councilmember
Can I take
Katsas.
it one? Okay, and so and just to kind of highlight, so you're looking to highlight the arts and present it in like a new format. It sounds like this is kind of it's exciting because you have something that's somewhat different than our other street closures.
Right. I think Ron said something that I really liked, and that was that these other festivals, kind of beer events with some art, where this would be more of an art event where there would happen to be some beer.
Okay, good, thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions from Council or President Isley? The Mayor, any more thoughts or comments?
Just that I'm in support of this. I've been to several cities where there's a street closure of this magnitude, and it's just for the arts. But again, as Ron Lucas indicated, it'll be art with some beer, and that's I think typical of events like these. So I'm really hopeful that there's a good turnout for this. This is an exciting venture for AMAC, because I think that this is, as this rolls forward, we could see more of this likely in some other locations in the uptown area in the future. But using the new stretch of West Union, I think is a great site to start from.
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, and I too would echo some of the sentiment that the mayor's offered. This proposal is not coming to us in a vacuum. This has been kicked around within the Municipal Arts Commission for a year or two at least, and I know there's been efforts in the past within the art community to try to highlight our local artists. So I do want to acknowledge too that within the meetings I've been to at the Municipal Arts Commission as well as the mayor, that this has been an ongoing conversation and part of the agenda topic for a number of meetings. Does that sound accurate, Chair? Yeah. Thank you. If there's no further questions or comments, is there anything else that presenters would like to share? Nothing else? Okay. Thank you. I believe that concludes that part. Thank you.
Awesome.
Our next conversation bullet point this evening is the Athens Hocking Solid Waste Management Plan. So the city is in receipt of a certified letter from Roger Bale, and some of the highlights include, and I'll read the first paragraph of the letter. Enclosed, you will find a copy of the draft solid waste management plan for the Athens Hocking Solid Waste District. The development of the solid waste plan is a requirement of Ohio law. Every solid waste management district in Ohio must periodically revise and update their solid waste management plan. And a few more talking points along that. The revise and update of the solid waste management plan district is the process we're going through. They need to hear back from us between May 1st and July 29th. And so as a courtesy, I think Mr. Bale was being considerate of the fact that he knows we're going to be on vacation, absent during part of the summer. So he was starting the process sooner rather than later. Likewise, the district held a 33-day public comment period, which was from February 26, 2018 through April 1st, 2018. April 2nd of 2018 was when it was held in Athens County, and then April 3rd of 2018 was when it was held in Hocking County. On April 11th, the District Policy Committee met to discuss and address public comments on the solid waste plan. Updates were made, and then as we acknowledged, Ohio law requires the district to deliver a copy to the county commissioners and the legislative authority of each municipal corporation and township that are under the district's jurisdiction. So this evening we do have Mr. Roger Bale here, as well as Lenny Eliason from the county commissioner's office. So they're here to answer any questions that we may have, update us as well. Mr. Eliason has acknowledged that the policy committee has recommended passage of this, and that it's comprised of equal representation of both counties. Any thoughts or questions or comments?
I think that we have to look also at what the other programs that are being done with the other groups, you know, like with the composting and stuff, when we think about this sort of thing beyond just the management plan. So I appreciate the discussion here that we're having. Thank you.
Anyone else from council or the mayor's office wishing to comment? Okay. Any no comments from Mr. Bale or Mr. Eliason? Okay, they're both here and prepared to answer any questions we may have.
I think if you have questions,
okay,
or if you need us, or
thank you.
I mean, we can talk about solid waste for a long time.
Thank you. If there's no comments or questions, then that would conclude everything on the agenda for this committee. So thank you, President Nisley.
Okay, thanks. We'll move on to the Transportation Committee, and Councilmember Kotsis chairs that, and he'll be joined by Councilmember McGee and Grace. And Councilmember Crowell is not able to be with us tonight.
Okay. Are we ready? Okay. So tonight on Transportation Committee, we just have two topics to cover. The first one being mobile vending, which I will pass the baton here to Member McGee, and he can take it from here.
Thank you, Chairman Katsas. As Council knows, and as the public knows, I have for several months attempted to provide Council with a amended ordinance that would deal with the problem of not having the parking spots used that are on Union Street when vendors are not vending. Over the past 6 months, I've noticed there's a great deal of non-vending going on, and of course those spots are vacant and unable to be used by the public until after 4 o'clock. I have proposed a very simple amendment to the current ordinance, which would take the 4 o'clock time and reduce it to noon, so that the vendors would have basically a reservation if they choose to use the parking spots on Union Street. They would have from 4 o'clock a.m. until noon that they could park and get set up and commence to use it as. As I indicated in a letter to the editor, they of course could then vend after the noon. They can vend until approximately 3:30 in the morning should they choose to do so. I made one last twerk to the proposal this afternoon, and that dealt with a situation where a vendor might on occasion not be able to make it to a parking spot by noon. I had spoken to one vendor who on occasion anticipates vending perhaps at O'Bleness Hospital or perhaps several locations for noon rush, and believes that he would be to the parking spot after 1 o'clock. So what I would propose is that in addition to the reservation being moved back to noon and opened up for Sundays so that anyone can use it without reservation, use those parking spots. The vendors would also be able, if they know in advance that they're not going to be able to be present to vend by noon, that they would be provided with bags to put over the parking meters that would allow them to have access to the spot till 3 o'clock p.m. I would assume that if they are truly intending to vend, that they would certainly be there by 3 o'clock p.m. I would hope that this would be a rare occasion and not a situation that would be abused by certain vendors, but I believe this would accomplish two things, and I hope the council will consider it in its full. It would open up the spots to a basically use it or lose it kind of concept. The spots are not the property of the vendors. They are for the vendors to do business in, and I think that's an important distinction. The spots are the property of the public and the city. The second thing it would do, of course, would be to provide the vendors with an option to conduct their current business and actually encourage them to actually vend. So again, I would be making the proposal for the adoption of the amendment of this ordinance at the upcoming full council meeting. Any questions?
Yes.
I wonder about the vendors who have paid their permit fees for this current year under the current ordinance. What happens?
Well, that's a very good question, and again, it gets to the concept of, are you having a property right in this? Is this renting the space, or is this basically paying a fee to use and have the opportunity to use it? I submit that with the ordinance as it would be provided, they would still have the opportunity to be there from the same time further on without paying meters, and that was an important part of their early concern, that they didn't want to pay meters. So again, it's not a property right which they currently use. They're paying so much per year for the right to vend in Athens. So that would not change. Under the current proposal, it's a yearly fee. That fee was basically tied into the parking time that the vendors were using. They're not being assessed the additional time from, I believe, 4 o'clock to 6 o'clock that we have increased our parking time. Overall, I think something very important needs to be noted too, and that would be that all of the issues of fees, when they would be paid, and the issue of vendor spaces, locations, whatever, the size of the vending spots, all that should be subject to a committee review at some point in the near future. But I would anticipate all that would cause some intense discussion and perhaps some disagreement, and I would expect it to take some time to get it resolved. But this is a very, very simple issue. Again, the vendors, if you say it's a property right, then we have to deal with it as such. I do not believe the city of Athens has given, through its license to vend, has given any property rights. So I think this ordinance could be adopted in its entirety. Thank you.
I just feel that by changing the amount of time that the space is reserved for them, it does change the value of that permit that they've already paid for. And I know that there certainly are vendors who only intend to vend for the dinner hours, and over the summer they have the plan to be there for a concert under the elms or those types of events because they vend elsewhere at lunchtime. And so I think that that would significantly change the value of this permit that they've paid for if the spaces are not reserved until later in the day. So I feel that it's unfair to change the value of something that they've already paid for after they've paid for it. Like, I mean, they bought this permit under a certain term, under a certain plan. By paying this, our spaces are reserved during these hours, and I think it's unfair to them to change the terms of that agreement after they've entered into the agreement by paying the permit fee. So that's my concern with the vendors who have already purchased their permits for this year. I do believe that this changes the value of the permit.
Again, I think you look at it as a property right rather than as a reservation that the city has a right. But I will emphasize that the reason I moved the ordinance to allow, if they choose to bag on occasion, they would have the right to do that. So for the concert under the elms, there's no reason why they couldn't get there by 2:50 if they bag it the day before. The real question becomes, does the city want to just take 10 parking spaces, our prime parking spaces, and say, whenever you want to use this, it's your property, you can do that? And I don't believe that's what the city's intended to do. And I think that, again, with the bagging opportunity, so long as it's not abused, if it's once a week that they're doing it for the concert under the elms, let them do it. It's a 1 hour difference. If, on the other hand, they're not vending, they don't intend to vend, then why should spots be set aside for them? And I think I really want to emphasize this too. We're all aware that the summertime has some distinctions, but in the wintertime as well. I mean, this applies to the wintertime as well, when nobody is vending out there at all for anywhere from 3 months to this last year for almost 5 months, nobody vended there. So there are certain vendors who do actually exercise their right to do business there, which is what the city provides them with the opportunity for. But thank you for your reservation. Any other questions from council? Yeah.
Member McGee, this has changed so many times. Mm-hmm. In all honesty, I have to tell you that now with this bagging issue that's come forward, I'm even more thoroughly confused with where this is going. As you know, you did get a correspondence from the Director of Code, Rick Soroy's, with his concerns about it, to which you answered, and he answered you back. But we also received a correspondence that I don't believe that you received, because Captain Harvey, who heads up parking enforcement, he also chimed in, and he shared the same concerns as did Rick Soroy's, with who's issuing the bags, how are we monitoring the bags, how are we enforcing the bags. A lot of what has been seen in the past, and I'm going to paraphrase off of this, is that they've seen so many different scenarios to where somebody will essentially game the bag that's on something and write some other time in there or do something, and who's going to be tracking that. And so again, on the city administration end, there's with this new now bagging, this option of bagging things, is once again is going to put a level of impact for enforcement on the parking enforcement department. As Rick Soroy has indicated, he doesn't issue bags. That's a parking enforcement.
That's fine.
That issues those bags. But
if I might reply to your, and very briefly reply to it, as I anticipated, if a vendor anticipates that he would be doing business past the noon hour and getting there past the noon hour before 3 o'clock, so that the entire parking space is not wasted for use by the public. But if he envisions doing that on an occasion, I see no reason why he cannot be issued a bag by the appropriate agency. He can use a bag if there's abuse of that, and there's something stuck in there, the proposal that if 3 times somebody bags a meter and does not vend, that they would lose the right to henceforth bag the meter for the rest of the year. That's just an obvious attempt to show some sort of ability to control it. But I would like to give the vendors the opportunity to play fair. And I don't think it would necessarily be abused. I don't think vendors are going to race there, bag every meter that they would have normally and just leave it like that. If they did, then we'd be back in council for protracted use. I think we all need to sit down here and do some reasonable consideration of each other's positions on this. But in the meantime, while we're doing that, there's no reason why the public should not be able to use the meters that are not being used. And the bagging is a very simple thing. Nobody is asking anybody to do anything other than give the vendors the opportunity to bag it till 3 o'clock.
well, and again, it just becomes an enforcement issue, because someone could bag that meter and come forth 3:15, 3:30, that bag is sitting there, but the vendor's not there, and then what do we do?
And aren't the bags typically a single use? Because you use a Sharpie or something to mark on it the time and date. So do they get a replacement one every week?
That's typically what we do if it's a contractor bagging, which is one colored bag, versus event bagging, which is a different colored bag. And then there is, as you mentioned, and I agree with you wholeheartedly, is the size of the parking spaces, because of vending trucks and what someone might need inside that vending truck. Your vending truck goes from 20 feet to 22 feet long, and how do we deal with that? That's kind of a whole different thing, but it's related to, I think, a bigger conversation to be had. In particular, when you're looking at other municipalities that have more extensive vending than we do in the city of Athens. But I've brought this up before, is that individuals in the city of Athens who vend and have gone through the appropriate steps to get vending permits and health department certification and so on and so forth, that they can, with permission from a private property owner in a B zone, and possibly even an M, I don't know about that, but I know in B zones that they can certainly vend in those spaces on that private property, or the private owner's property, private property owner's property. Something like that.
Thank you. I believe that
Okay.
sums up the issue.
That wraps that up for, okay, to be continued. Okay, the second point tonight, and this is why we'll actually be having our special council meeting following right after our committee meetings tonight. We're going to talk about road salt. Are we ready for winter? It's coming. So this is a collective purchase program that we have done in the past. I had a discussion with Public Works Director Andy Stone today, just to kind of get highlighted again on the program. We buy in bulk, and of course get a price break for the volume that we purchase in road salt. ODOT rolled the program out here about 3 weeks ago. So I think about every city is probably having to go through the same process where we have to accelerate and suspend the rules in order to get in on the program. To this year around, we are looking for 12,000 tons. That's the request amount that we're looking at. And that will be added to our existing amount that we have left over from last year, which is 800 tons. A little bit lower in reserves, but we had a rough winter. So OU is also participating in this program, and last year they used a little bit over 400 tons, and they're expecting that using somewhere between 200 and 500 used for next year. So this is just an ordinance to apply for the program. We're not looking for money appropriation or anything like that, but that is the program in a nutshell, and we will be asking for a suspension on the first read. So do we have any questions?
Okay.
Administration, do you have anything to add?
Just for a suspension like this, it's not atypical for ODOT to release a program like this with little notice, such as that we received. And again, as you mentioned quite well, is that we're not the only municipality that is having to scramble to get into this program.
I would believe that since we took a vacation here on the 5th week of April, that probably also threw. We might have been able to squeeze in a second read if that was the case, but. And is it the middle of May that we? I mean,
May 18th.
May 18th.
So we couldn't squeeze it in.
We're right up against them. Yeah.
There we are.
Okay.
Okay.
Well, with that wraps up Transportation Committee.
Okay.
Thank you.
We'll move on to Finance and Personnel with Jeff Reisner chairing and Kent Butler is the other council member here tonight. As we mentioned, Councilmember Crowell is not able to be with us tonight.
Thank you, Madam President. I'll convene the committee of two here to order. You notice on the agenda there's 2 bullet points, appropriations and note renewal. I was informed late this afternoon from the auditor that the note renewal for the University of State's assessment was not necessary because it's not really a note, it's a bond. Is that correct? So we don't have to do anything with it. So our task has been lightened a little bit. But that leaves us with appropriations. Sorry. You didn't want to hear about it anyway. We have a couple of items here. I think we have a, let's see, it says here, a short appropriation ordinance for pool startup and technology grant for the court computer fund. New appropriations to discuss, the BWC $140,000 and sewer general fund amend support to $21,600. Anyone care to address the needs or what fors?
Talk a little bit.
Okay.
Because so we did discuss the workers' comp payment at our auditor meeting last week, and we got another rebate, which we have for 3 years now. And so our practice has been to appropriate that money for that next payment, rather than leaving it in the fund. That money goes into the general fund, and so that it might be spent on something else. So we want to go ahead and appropriate that for our workers' comp bill, which will be due the 1st of June. And then the general fund admin increase, just a miscalculation. You know, that's a formula that we use for all the departments with personnel to contribute to the general fund for administrative services for departments such as mine, the law director, mayor's office, HR, code enforcement, any you know, fund in the general fund in particular that doesn't really have a revenue stream of their own. And so we just need to add a little bit onto that.
Okay.
For that. So these will be hopefully in an ordinance for next Monday, those last two. Then I don't know.
So there's no need to rush it through suspensions or anything like that?
I don't know.
Certainly not
the
workman's comp, would it?
Well, maybe. Since it's into May, we might want that. We just got that about a week ago.
Right.
So we may want to go ahead and use that for this next payment, or true-up payment. And just to follow up on the bond issue, is I forgot that that was actually done through Hocking Valley, but a bond issue is for 10 years or more. And the rollover loans that we do are from 1 year to the next, and hopefully it doesn't take us 10 years to pay them off.
Hopefully.
Yeah.
Ms. Mayor?
For ordinance 65-18, which includes the Arts, Parks, and Recreation Income Tax Fund 273, that one we will be asking for suspension to move that forward, and that's because at this point, as you know, pool will be opening. We're on target for the pool being opened June 12th, and with that, these are items that are necessary for that pool opening, things like shepherd's hooks, ring buoys, rescue tubes, things of that nature for the lifeguards, and there's some other items in there as well, safety equipment related.
Okay.
We need to purchase and have ready for the 12th opening.
Right. So it's items that are necessary for the safety of the public and the pool. So
yep.
Be a good idea to get it done tonight. And we'll we're 65-18. What we'll have to do is suspend the rules. We'll make a motion to adopt, and hopefully we have 6 members tonight, so I think we'll get a majority there. Any other appropriation items? Anyone? No. That's all I have on mine. So, do you have anything?
And Development Committee?
Thank you.
Councilmember Fall chairs this, and Councilmember Reisner, McGee, and Grace.
Tonight we have one agenda item. It's to announce that we are ready to announce the the new members of the commission, Affordable Housing Commission, that has been being set up with the help of President Nisley, who has been amazing. This, just a quick background, the commission was recommended by the ad hoc Affordable Housing Committee that was set up a couple years ago, that was between public-private state partnership with looking at issues and problems, potential solutions to our affordable housing issues that we have in town. So this commission now has all members needed. They are, 4 of the members are statutorily appointed by various, by the mayor, the university, there is a Metropolitan Housing Association, and council person who is statutorily put on the committee, and then there's 7 different positions that the council has put into place These represent various aspects of affordable housing issues, such as tenant representative, real estate representative, seniors agency representative, financial representative, at-large rep, and 2 at-large reps, so there's 2. So, questions? We'll bring those names forward on Monday. So, thank you.
Okay. That was a short committee meeting. Thank you. Efficiently run, and we're now moving on to our special session. So the special session looks a little bit different from what might be a regular council meeting night. What we're doing is moving through, as we said, we're reading the ordinances tonight in part because that road salt agreement has to be read and passed. And so as part of that, while we're reading ordinances, that gives us an opportunity to read the other ones that were up for third reading, second reading, and first reading. So you'll see that the readings of the ordinances, but then after that, you won't see the usual announcements or opportunities for citizens to speak. It will just be the readings, and then we'll adjourn.
President Nicely,
yes.
I do have a question. Usually during council meetings, we do have the opportunity to add other business, but it's not on here, so we cannot.
Not in a special session.
All right. Great,
Yep.
thank you. Just checking.
Okay, thanks for the question. We appreciate it. Okay, and our first item of business before we read them would be to establish a quorum. We do have all members but Councilmember Crowell present with us tonight. So ordinances for third reading. The first one is Ordinance 5318, an ordinance authorizing 2018 street paving and repairs. This is project number 319 and introduced by Councilmember Katsas.
President Nicely, at this moment, I would like to amend Ordinance 5318.
Okay, and a second?
Second.
Okay. We have a motion and second for amending the ordinance.
And the reason is we need to change some of the monetary values throughout the ordinance.
Okay. And okay, so right now we will we have a motion and second, and you could go ahead and read that information.
Okay.
And so that council members are aware how we're changing that.
So this is basically from administration last week. Mayor Patterson informed us that Ohio University wants to participate with our annual paving program. So they are looking to contribute $400,000 to the pot. So when you look at Ordinance 5318, we're adding a whereas. Ohio University is participating in the annual paving program and will contribute $400,000. Under Section 2, striking the dollar amount of $150,000 and changing that to $550,000 to Street Fund 220 TC 500. Section 3, the Service Safety Director is hereby authorized to expend up to $1,100,000, and so we're changing, that is the amount that is, 1.1 million is now the new amount. It used to be $700,000. And once again, changing that one, and this is also in Section 3, the striking $150,000 and changing that to $550,000 from Street Fund TC 220 TC 500.
Okay, thank you. So we do have a motion and second for amending, and motions with debate permitted. One of them is amending. So are there any other questions or debate or, yes, discussion? Councilmember McGee.
Yes, I just wondered how the $400,000 share for the university was compiled. Who determined that it would be sufficient to cover the streets that the university is asking the city to combine with? I just wanted to make sure the city is not going to, have to pay more.
Sure, sure.
It's based upon estimates of the cost of asphalt as well as the estimate as to what it would cost for labor to have that put down. Much like we do on the city end, it's, at this point, it's an estimate as to what that's going to cost based upon current asphalt prices and current labor for similar projects that have taken place.
And I would like to add to that the handout that we got last week does come from Ohio University's Architecture, Design, and Construction, and they list out the three streets that they would like to do, being Race Street, South Green Drive at Ping, and West Green Drive, and they also have the square footage of each project listed on there.
Okay. So, and Councilmember McGee, your question is a good one. So it's a wash, we would assume, with the university absorbing their costs. And we've done this kind of cooperative agreement before when we did the improvements on Richland Avenue, I think.
We
Was
have.
that correct? Yeah.
I would also expect that if they find something underneath one of their streets and it costs them a little bit more, that they're going to be like what the city happens. We have kind of a cost overrun idea behind. You never know.
It's true. It's a good point.
Okay.
Yes.
Member Butler.
Thank you. I just briefly want to thank our mayor, his administration, I believe our new safety director, Andy Stone, as well as his predecessor, and the university for cooperating. Again, this is going to save the taxpayers money, both at the city, at the university, and again, I applaud this communication, this dialogue that continues to exist, and it takes work, and so I am expressing my appreciation to the administration for that. Thank you.
Okay.
And just to piggyback on one point that Member Butler made, the overall goal of this is to bring a bigger project forward that hopefully drives down the cost per square foot. When you're a contractor and you have constructions, there's setup costs, and so if you can come to a city and set up for a larger contract, that does bring down the overall price. Okay. So that is I assume that's our goal. You can correct me, Mr. Mayor, if I'm wrong.
No, you're absolutely correct. And I would like to add to this whole conversation that last week I sat before the District 18 Transportation Improvement District meeting, in which there is, under the Transportation Improvement District, which is all based upon economic development, that there's a possibility that West Union, which is part of the street repaving, as well as Richland Avenue, may receive some additional funding for those two, which could further stretch our dollars to possibly go deeper into our alternative list of streets. So just to share with council, but you're absolutely right. It's all about lowering those costs by essentially setup fees and buying in bulk. You're buying a greater amount of asphalt, which can help certainly garner better pricing on your asphalt.
Thank you.
All right, so we have the motion and second for amending Ordinance 5318. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Okay, that motion carries, and the ordinance has been amended and read for the first time. And so you probably need to...
Do we need... No, we don't need no. We do not need a suspension at this point.
It can be. Okay, so we don't need, we're
we can
not
let it
as
ride.
urgent on this one. All right. Ordinance 5418 is an ordinance authorizing a pilot residential curbside compost project. And this is introduced by Councilmember Butler.
Thank you. Thank you, President Isley. I would like to make a motion to adopt Ordinance 54-18.
Second.
Thank you. This ordinance would be a 6-month pilot program, and this would be within the residential community. It's a compost project spearheaded by Rural Action's Zero Waste Program, and this would be essentially from July 1st, 2018 through December 31st of 2018. This does have the mayor's support, and again, there's been dialogue between Rural Action and the mayor's office. This would, this ordinance would, let's see here, amend by appropriating from the unappropriated balance a sum of $46,000 to the garbage fund. And again, we've discussed this in committee, and this is third reading. Thank you.
Yes. Councilmember Fall.
I just say yay to the people who came with this. It's another step Athens is doing, leading by example, making our city sustainable, reducing the cost to taxpayers, because even though there's a fee, there's a cost to the city for doing this project, every single pound of garbage that does not go to the landfill is less money for us. Landfill tipping fees are only going to go up, and this will also help with our carbon footprint. And one of the things is that you may not think about composting, but through this process, and your neighbors getting this great warm, fuzzy feeling because they're doing the right thing, they're going to learn about composting. And maybe it will start people who want to compost in their backyard and use it in their backyard, or do other things like that. So I think that this is awesome. This is going to be pushing us forward.
Yes.
Yes.
Thank you. As you know, I've been opposed to this in some ways, which is really ironic since I just joined Rural Action several weeks ago. I see this as an ineffective attempt to deal with a problem. And as you've mentioned it, initially the cost is $46,000. I'm not sure if you recall the question was asked, and I believe the answer was the anticipated cost is $200,000 to $300,000 a year thereafter. And I think that's an important thing to keep in mind for the amount of money that the city has been asked to spend for this kind of program. I believe there are some other options to deal with this. The first question is there a problem? It's not really a problem, but it is something that could require a solution. Now, Member Fall has indicated that it would save the city some money if we would all contribute to this composting. It would certainly save the city some money and would help perhaps our gardens and our lawns and our property if people would just learn to compost themselves rather than transporting this compost around and putting it into a great big pile where eventually some citizens would have the opportunity to get a few bags of compost out of their tax money for their garbage funds. I believe the city should be looking at whether this is really well spent as opposed to other options. And again, when I look at it and see the end run for the city of Athens to be paying a large amount of money for a product that will probably employ certain people to drive around in trucks and empty buckets, I have to ask, is that really cutting down on carbon footprint? The more we use transportation services to provide this kind of service, I think the more carbon problems we create. So again, I think there's other options, and I think it would be premature to approve this. Thank you.
President Nisley.
Councilmember McGee, thanks for the comments, and I too had some questions and did have some discussion in the mayor and auditors meeting that's held, and Deputy Service Safety Director Ron Lucas did provide some information, because my concern too is the long-term, the balance of the garbage fund, and for what our intended purposes are for that, and at what point we might need to put through rate increases with anticipated costs of this doubling or tripling. But my questions, I believe, have been reasonably answered, and I don't usually weigh in on things, but I'm just trying to provide information, background information, that it is a pilot program, and there are other programs within the city where we provide services where they do subsidize. But I also think, knowing that it's a pilot program, that Rural Action is also going to be, and the city will be, as I'm sure our auditor is here, she's very careful with watching our finances and our balances. As we evaluate the program with Rural Action, we'll also be taking into account, what is the long-term cost, at what point might rate increases come through, and the fact that a continuation of the program beyond the pilot program would probably be some kind of forepay, that if you want to pay to participate in that, that would be the way in which probably a good portion of the cost, but we would need to address that if this pilot program were approved. So those are my comments, and thank you, Councilmember Butler.
I'd like to point out another thing. And we have the recycling program started out in a very similar way. We pay a fee for the recycling that we do. I don't remember, $2 or something. And I think majority of people support that. I think a majority of people will look at this as a pilot program. But we have to, we're going to pay tipping fees no matter what, right? So it's going to either be doing something so where we can capture some of the benefits from the compost or other municipal waste, or we dump it in the dump, whatever they call them nowadays. So I think that we have to look at it from a responsibility of the community to be able to push yet another way to help reduce the amount of waste that we get rid of. And this falls in exactly with tenets from the sustainability plan that has been put forward and the comprehensive plan put forward, but what people want to see. And I don't think that to look at a garbage fee or something, it makes sense to break it out between the dump and the compost and the recycling, because then people realize where they're spending most of their garbage dollar, between those three. So I think this is really important, and I think that at the end of the 6 months, we'll really be able to tell whether it's going to be fully functional for our community.
Yes, Councilman McGee.
If I could add, I find myself a little suspicious of pilot programs. When I first came to council, we had a proposal that would have the city basically pay $50,000 a year for the rental of garbage cans, basically the solar compressor cans. It's been over 2 years. I assume we've paid over $100,000 for that. We've never, to my knowledge, had a report indicating how much the city has saved. And we still have situations where students dump their trash next to these compressors. So my point is simply that a lot of spending gets in under the loophole of pilot programs, or this is new, or it'll sort itself out. And I think this would be a fantastic program if it were going around encouraging citizens to do their composting themselves in their own yards. If we would put that kind of emphasis onto citizens and explain to them the benefits, if we would take some of the apartment complexes and ask them to set aside a little area where certain composting activity could be conducted, and then people could get the compost and do their gardens. But I think this is set up again to just be an enlarging, I hate to say it, growing government kind of situation. And I think that it's not what the citizens want. It's not what the taxpayers certainly want. And I think it's, as members of City Council, we need to be aware of that. So thank you.
Thank you. One thought I have in reflection to the comments that I'm hearing here is that I view this as an opportunity for the city to collaborate and partner with a nonprofit organization that has done the research and some of the dirty work to see if this is possible. Conversely, I support the idea of a pilot program because I think it gives us a starting point and some data to look at, and then we can reflect and see if this is a worthwhile endeavor in the future. So respectfully, I disagree with my colleague on the other end. Some communities that are much larger than ours that have successful composting programs include Milwaukee, Wisconsin, Montpelier, Vermont, Boston, Massachusetts, the Research Triangle of Raleigh-Durham, North Carolina, and then Sacramento, California. So I think there's models out there where this is happening, and I think that it's an exciting endeavor for us to consider experimenting. And then if it doesn't work, or if we see that it was a failed attempt, then we know we've tried. Thank you. I believe the mayor has some comments as well. Thank you.
I do, just to the point that, and unfortunately I didn't speak with Deputy Service Safety Director this afternoon as to what the numbers of those who have volunteered to be part of this pilot program, but as of the beginning of last week, it was already up to more than 80, and that we had only put the announcement out, I think, a week prior to that. And among those who are volunteering want to be part of the pilot program, a couple of them have indicated to me they do compost, but to have this convenience now to where somebody can come and pick up their compost and take care of it themselves was an interesting thing to find out. So I hear what you're saying, that people could be encouraged to compost themselves, but again, I'm hearing some mixed reviews on that for people who are composting. There's also some who are already in the composting program to where they drop it off at farmers market, and they too want to be part of this pilot to where they don't have to take their compost to the farmers market, instead the convenience of having it picked up. At the end of the day, I mean, it is a carbon footprint issue. You know, Quasar, which is a company that makes digesters and produces methane gas, which in turn creates electric, you know, power, generates energy, electricity, have scoped out for Athens County using sludge from wastewater treatment plants, along with potentially a program of this, to use as an estimate what the city would generate in terms of composting material for something very different, to where they do it up in Zanesville. There's a Quasar digester in Zanesville right now, which is generating a lot of electricity, as well as methane filling stations, you know, for gas-powered vehicles or whatnot. So I think it's a little short-sighted to sit and think that it's just a pilot and it may not be worthwhile in the long run. I think that if you think a little bit more broadly, that there could be some other things that come into play in the not too distant future, but it's a pilot at the end of the day.
Thank you, Mayor.
Okay, we have a motion and second, and any other comments, questions from council members or administration? Any comments or questions from the audience? Yes. Can you go up to the podium if you're going to speak? Let us know your name.
Okay, my name is Judy Roman. I just wonder, what is the percentage of, when you think about, you know, people that are going to be using that, how many of these are college kids and who probably won't use it? Like, how does it break down, college kids versus the other people in the city of Athens?
I don't know what the percentage of college students, since the pilot's going to be launching while, you know, during the summer months when the students are away. You know, I don't know. It will be asked in a survey that individuals will fill out. So likely we will be able to capture graduate students and any undergraduate students who opt in, who volunteer to be a part of the pilot. But we likely won't know that until we start getting the surveys back from those who are wanting to participate.
Well, will it be the students, or will it be the owners of the rental units that have to fill out this information?
It would likely be the students, because they are the ones who are generating the composting material as opposed to a landlord.
And so they pay they pay for this waste removal now, or do the landlords pay for it?
I think it's a mix in terms of just refuge fees. Some landlords may likely just work that into the lease agreement, while others, it's on the resident who's renting that unit.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Thanks. Okay, we have a motion and second for approval. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay?
Nay.
Okay. The motion carries with a 5-1. Thank you.
Thank you.
Ordinance 5518 is an ordinance granting a revocable license to Thomas Parfit, owner, 134 Columbus Road, to allow parking on the city right-of-way. And this is introduced by Councilmember Fall.
Thank you. From waste to parking. Well, this is a 10-year revocable license to allow for parking. Pretty straightforward. All the paperwork has been filled out and signed off by administration. I move that we adopt 5518.
Second.
Okay. Motion and second for approval of 5518. Do we have any other questions or comments from council members or from the audience? Okay. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed, nay. The motion carries and the ordinance is approved. Ordinance 5618 is an ordinance amending the 2018 appropriation ordinance and is introduced by Councilmember Reisner.
Thank you, Madam President. This has been discussed in committee and read twice. As usual, we always have to make changes to our appropriation ordinance somewhere along in the new year, so it's been read once. My voice is rather tenuous tonight. My laryngitis hasn't really got away, so I really hate to read the whole thing again, but if you have any questions, I'll be glad to answer them as best I can. Excuse me.
Okay, and so
I make a motion that we
to
adopt
approve?
5618.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and second for approval of ordinance 5618. Any questions or comments? And this is, we might say, I know your
I can offer
voice,
highlights.
yeah, it's $2,000 to the Recreation Fund to refund a rental payment to Arts West renovation schedule, and then $4,000 to the Law Administration Building Improvements Fund for their ADA accessibility doors to the walkway, and then $20,000 for the Sewer Maintenance Fund for a relocated sanitary sewer on East State Street. So those are the details of the math on that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. And any questions or comments? Okay, and any questions or comments from the audience? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. The motion carries and the ordinance is approved. We now have ordinances for second reading. The first, and I will read through on titles for these. I will also offer if somebody needs to make a comment and they need to, just raise their hand on it. Otherwise, I'll move forward from one to the next. Ordinance 5918 is an ordinance accepting the donations by TS Tech Americas, Inc. of 13.285 acres and Scott and Gwinnett Brooks of 0.284 acres, totaling 13.569 acres, more or less, off Kenny Drive to the city of Athens. This is introduced by Councilmember Fall. Okay. Ordinance 6018 is an ordinance creating downtown redevelopment districts in the city of Athens, declaring the improvement to certain parcels of real property to be a public purpose and exempt from taxation, requiring the owner of the parcels to make service payments in lieu of taxes, specifying the plan for using service payments to promote economic development and job creation, authorizing the execution of an economic development plan, establishing funds for the 234 Washington DRD, the Sheltering Arms DRD, and the Athens Depot DRD for the deposit of such service payments. And this is introduced by all council members. Ordinance 6118 is an ordinance amending Athens City Code Title III, Administrative Provisions, Chapter 3.07, Administrative Departments, Boards, and Commissions, Section 3.07.74A, Establishment of Environmental and Sustainability Commission, introduced by Councilmember Fall. Ordinance 6218 is an ordinance authorizing the mayor to make application and enter into a project agreement with the Ohio Department of Natural Resources and declaring an emergency, and is introduced by Councilmember Butler. Ordinance 6318 is an ordinance amending the 2018 appropriation ordinance and is introduced by Councilmember Reisner. And now we have ordinances for first reading, and as we explained, this I think both of them will need to be suspended tonight. One of them to be SALT agreement due to a pending deadline from Department of Transportation, and the other one, the finance appropriation ordinance for reasons of safety for appropriating some money for our pool. So the first one is the SALT agreement, 6418. This is an ordinance authorizing participation in the Ohio Department of Transportation's cooperative purchasing program and declaring an emergency, and is introduced by Councilmember Katsas.
President Nisley, at this time, I would like to suspend the rules for ordinance 06418.
Second.
And this is because in order to participate in this collective bulk purchasing program for next year's road salt, we have to have this ordinance in place by May 18th.
Okay, thank you. So we have a motion and second to suspend the rules for 6418. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. The rules have been suspended. Councilmember Katsas.
Thank you. At this moment, I would like to adopt ordinance 06418.
Second.
And with this, basically, we will be moving forward and requesting the ability to participate in this program, which will save the city money in that purchase price.
Okay. So we have a motion and second for approval of 6418. Any comments or questions from council members or admin? Any comments or questions from the audience? Okay. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. The motion carries and the ordinance is approved. Ordinance 6518 is an ordinance amending the 2018 appropriation ordinance and is introduced by Councilmember Reisner.
Thank you, Madam President. I'd like to make a motion to suspend the rules for 6518.
Second.
The reason for the suspension is we're under a deadline to get this equipment purchased for the opening of the pool, which is coming up very soon.
It is. We have a motion and second to suspend the rules. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. The rules have been suspended. Councilmember Reisner.
I'd like to make a motion to adopt 6518
Second.
for all the reasons stated.
Okay. And this is for the 6945 for the Clerk of Court Computer Fund and the 20,000 for the Arts, Parks, and Recreation. Motion and second for approval. Any other comments or questions from council members or administration? Comments or questions from the audience? All right. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. The motion carries. The ordinance is approved. And we stand adjourned. We should probably make a motion.
Motion to
Adjourn. Second. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
We are adjourned at 8:13. We'll see you next week. Thank you so much.